We move to question time.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Before the election, the Prime Minister promised all families will be better off. However, since the election, prices have increased across the board by 10%. Rents are up 16%, health costs are up 11%, food costs are up 12%, and gas is up 3%. Economist Brendan Rinn said last week that high government spending is also hampering the Reserve Bank's efforts to control inflation. The Reserve Bank itself has said similar. Why can this government not manage inflation and instead is making the problem worse?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, this government's first priority is to deliver cost-of-living relief. And you've seen that by the priorities that the government has put in place and has delivered on, whether it is every Australian taxpayer getting a tax cut, not just some, every Australian household getting $300 of energy bill relief, 2.6 million low-paid workers who are getting their third consecutive pay rise, stronger Medicare, cheaper medicines in every community, HECS relief for everyone with student debt, more homes built more quickly in every part of the country, cheaper groceries by strengthening the Food and Grocery Code, all cost-of-living relief without adding to inflation, and, of course, planning a future made in Australia. Now, there is more to do, but this is this government's agenda. And can I just remind the Leader of the Opposition, when he comes into this place talking about cost of living, that those opposite have opposed every piece of cost of living relief we have provided. You've offered no help, no plans for people who are doing it tough, but what you have offered is relentless and pointless negativity. And of course, President, what we do know is that those opposite are planning $315 billion in cuts. This is their recipe to get the economy back on track. This is their recipe to get the economy back on track. They say this is their recipe for a stronger Australia. Cuts to Medicare, cuts to pensions, cuts to payments, cuts to housing, cuts to TAFE. This is what those opposite think leads to a better economic outcome for families. Well, from the party that has always believed in lower wages as a deliberate design feature of the Australian economy, I don't think Australians will think very highly of your $315 billion worth of cuts.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
President, before the election, the Prime Minister promised cheaper mortgages. But under Labor, interest rates have increased 12 times, meaning a family with an average mortgage is paying $24,000 more per year. Interest paid on mortgages has nearly tripled under Labor. As Labor's handed down 3 budgets, economists have said the extra spending is keeping interest rates higher for longer. Does the Labor government accept any responsibility for interest rates staying higher for longer in Australia, even as they come down in other countries?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Before I call you, Minister Wong, Senator McGrath, withdraw that comment.
I withdraw.
You referred to a senator in a derogatory way. In case you seemed puzzled, but you referred to a senator in a derogatory way. That's why I've asked you to withdraw. Minister Wong. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, one thing we are not going to do is to take the prescription of those opposite. These are the people who would prefer Australia to be in recession. I mean, that is what they are effectively saying. If you look at the last national accounts, as the Treasurer and the Finance Minister have gone through in great detail, as we have made the right calls to ensure that we deal both with cost of living relief in a responsible way, but also recognising where the economy is. The prescription that those opposite are calling for, the prescription that those opposite are calling for would mean that Australia was in recession. Now, how is that going to help working families? How is that going to help working families? And that has always been your only prescription, isn't it? People have got to do it tough. That's why you voted against energy price relief. That's why you voted against cheaper medicines. That's why you voted against the Medicare reforms, and that's why you've always opposed higher wages for Australians.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
In June 2022, Australia's inflation was 6.1%, but in the Eurozone it was 8.6%, the US 9.1%, Canada 8.1%. Today, inflation is 3.5%, but in the Eurozone it's 2.2%, the US 2.9%, Canada 2.5%. So why was inflation better in Australia than other nations when Labor was elected, but is significantly worse today? Why are Labor's budgets keeping Australia's inflation rate higher for longer?
Senator Watt, I called you earlier. Interjections are disorderly. Minister Wong.
Make 2 points about both inflation and growth. First, in relation to countries overseas, inflation peaked later and lower here than in most other comparable nations. Rates started rising here later than most other comparable nations, and they rose by less in Australia than most of these nations, including the ones you've outlined. And remember also, some 2/3 of the OECD have had a negative quarter of growth, and your prescription would ensure we'd be amongst them. That is their economic prescription for this country. That is their economic prescription. Lower wages, less cost of living relief, fewer jobs, and less government spending, because we want to cut $315 billion worth of cuts out of the federal budget, which would include Medicare and pensions, where you can't get to $315 billion without doing that. You can't. Well, then come out and tell us what you're going to cut. Tell us what you're going to cut, because everybody knows what's in the Liberal DNA.
The time for answering has expired. Senator McGrath, I remind you of Standing Order 203. I've called you a number of times already, and we're not even 10 minutes in. Just a moment, Senator Walsh. I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the gallery of a parliamentary delegation from the National Assembly of Vietnam, led by Vice Presidents Her Excellency Ms Nguyen Thi Thanh. Last month, I had the privilege of visiting Vietnam on a delegation with Senator Ann Urquhart, the Honourable Kevin Hogan MP and Ms Dai Lei MP. I thank Her Excellency Thanh for her warm hospitality. I wish to also express my deepest sympathies to you and the Vietnamese people as your nation faces extreme weather events triggered by Typhoon Yagi. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and in particular to the Senate. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Gallagher. The Albanese Labor government went to the election saying we would reform aged care for residents, for families and for aged care workers. Over the last 2 years, we have implemented reforms including 24/7 registered nurses on site, increased care minutes, wage increases for workers, star ratings and better care and practices across the sector. How is the Albanese Labor government working to lift the standard of aged care in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question and in particular acknowledge the work that she has done throughout her career to support workers in the aged care sector through her union and also that a lot of the work we've done and worked with that union over time has supported those wage increases into the sector that have been so critical, ensuring that we have a workforce to care for elderly Australians. Since the election, the Albanese Labor government has made it a priority to deliver on our promise to older Australians and to the people who care for them. Today, there is a registered nurse on site in aged care 99% of the time. Older Australians are receiving an additional 3.9 million minutes of care every single day. We've delivered that 15% increase to the minimum award wage for more than 250,000 aged care workers, with more to come. And the feedback from the sector is that that's made a real difference, not only in appropriately remunerating those workers, but also in retention of those workers in this critical system. This week we reach another milestone for older Australians and their loved ones. Today, the Minister for Aged Care and the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have announced a $5.6 billion package that will make sure older Australians have access to the aged care services they need and deserve. This delivers a massive $4.3 billion investment in Support at Home starting on the 1st of July 2025. Essential changes to improving the funding, viability and quality of residential aged care, new laws to protect older Australians in aged care with stronger powers to investigate bad behaviour and civil penalties for breaching standards. And these reforms will deliver an aged care system that older Australians deserve. And I would acknowledge as well Senator Ruston for the work that she has done with the Minister for Aged Care, Minister Wells,
thank you,
in
Minister.
that.
Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. And I too note the work of the Minister for Aged Care, Ms Wells, and the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Mr Butler, in leading these reforms. The Aged Care Royal Commission was shocking and an undeniable call to action. How are the Albanese Labor government's once-in-a-generation aged care reforms responding to the findings of the Aged Care Royal Commission?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question. The Aged Care Royal Commission found that the system was failing older Australians, and the final report can be summed up in the title of the interim report, which was titled Neglect. Since we were elected, the Albanese government has worked tirelessly to address all of the problems across the aged care system. The reforms we've announced today will deliver more and better care for older Australians. Today we address the first recommendation that was made by the Commissioners. The government will introduce a new Aged Care Act to replace the Howard-era 1997 Aged Care Act. This Act will deliver once-in-a-generation reform to aged care. It will ensure that older Australians will be treated with dignity and respect, and it puts the rights of older Australians at the centre of our aged care system. This Act will deliver certainty in the future of aged care for older people, their families and carers, workers, advocates and aged care providers.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. And it's really wonderful to hear how we're moving from a system characterised as neglect to one of dignity and respect for older Australians. How will these reforms support older Australians choosing to retain their independence and remain in their homes as they age?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, and I thank Senator Walsh for the question. This new system will respond to the feedback we have received through the task force and other reports about what older Australians want. Increasingly, they want freedom, support and choice to remain in home and in the home and community they love. 1.4 million Australians will have the opportunity to stay in their home for longer through a new program called Support at Home. That program will start next year and will help older Australians to age at home. Support at Home will cut wait times to receive in-home aged care services. It will deliver more tailored support, increasing levels of ongoing care from levels 4 to 8. It will ensure fast access to assistive technology like walkers and wheelchairs, and increase the maximum support available from 61,000 to 78,000. Support at Home will offer a temporary boost through more transitional assistance. It will also provide access to palliative care, which is so important for older Australians.
Senator Patterson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. How many of the almost 3,000 Palestinians granted a visa by the Albanese Labor government who have arrived in Australia since the 7th of October have had their visa cancelled on character grounds?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Patterson, for the question. As I have previously indicated, we know that the opposition has been determined to make this issue a highly political one, and we know.
Order.
Sorry, Senator Cash, I'm answering
Senator
the question.
Cash.
We know
Senator
that,
Cash.
We know that the motivation of the opposition is to make this a political contest. We also know that the background checks that were undertaken before the granting of any of these visas were exactly the same processes as what occurred under the Coalition. That is a factor that they seek to ignore every time they seek to make this into a political issue. I will search for the figures to answer the specific question. I'm sure they're here somewhere in my brief, but obviously not being the minister responsible, they're not top of mind for me. But our focus in managing these visa applications, as is the case for all issues surrounding the current conflict in the Middle East, is to ensure that we maintain social cohesion at all steps of the way. Again, that is something that the opposition has had no interest in, as they have sought to make this a political issue at every step of the way, most recently in relation to these Palestinian visas.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Patterson.
Point of order on direct relevance. Perhaps the minister now has the answer, but this is a straight question. There was no preamble. It's a question for factual information. If the minister doesn't know, he should take it on notice.
Thank you, Senator Patterson. The minister indicated he thought he did have the figures. Let's see if he has them at the moment. But otherwise, as you've suggested, I'm assuming the minister will seek to take that on notice. Minister Watt.
What I can tell Senator Patterson is that the government's position is that if a person supports an extremist ideology, their visa will be rejected or cancelled, and that is something that Mr Burgess, the Director-General of ASIO, has made clear as well. We have seen, well, it's rather unfortunate that members of the opposition have consistently sought to misrepresent the words of the Director-General of ASIO. They have completely ignored his request of politicians to mind their language around these issues to not inflame situations. The opposition continues to ignore it.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I'll try my luck on a separate question, but given the minister wasn't able to answer the primary question, I have my doubts. How many Palestinian document holders who have had their visa cancelled have been deported from Australia?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Well, again, what I can tell Senator Patterson, and I can repeat the comments that Mr Burgess has made, is that anyone who fails character tests and fails the security vetting by ASIO doesn't get a visa in the first place, and should further information come to light, their visas are cancelled. Now, as I say, we have seen repeatedly the opposition try to make this issue into a political football and break down social cohesion. Mr Burgess, the Director-General of ASIO, has appealed to members of parliament to take a responsible attitude towards this. But the opposition continues to ignore that advice from Mr Burgess.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Patterson.
I just want to give the minister an opportunity to read the brief. He's been passed and perhaps he has the answer.
Senator Patterson, you've asked your question. I assumed you had a point of order. It is not an opportunity to get up and make a statement. Minister Watt.
It's pretty easy to be a smart aleck in this place, and Senator Patterson is doing his best to impersonate me. I know a lot about being a smart aleck in this place, and Senator Patterson, you're a pale imitation. But the bottom line is that this government takes the security of our citizens seriously, and that involves this.
Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Last month, the Minister for Home Affairs said, and I quote, "Certainly no country in the world would send people back to Gaza at the moment." Minister, can you confirm that Palestinian document holders in Australia who have their visas cancelled will remain in Australia instead of being deported?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Well, I'm not going to participate in the latest attempt of the opposition to try to whip up political fear and fear in the community around this issue. We know that the opposition, and Senator Patterson is one of the worst offenders at this, they are determined to whip up fear in the Australian community. And they have no regard whatsoever for social cohesion in this country. I'm not going to participate in that, and I'm not going to fuel it by participating in these kind of games from the opposition, when we have said, Mr Burgess at ASIO has said, that the Australian community's safety will be the most central issue that we consider when considering all of these matters. As we have said, and as Mr Burgess has said, if a person supports an extremist ideology, their visa will be rejected or cancelled. Anyone who espouses violent extremist ideology while in Australia will have their visa cancelled by the minister. Our government will also use character grounds to cancel the visa of anyone we believe is a threat to our country, and that's the way that it should be.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Shoebridge.
Mr President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. The UK recently cancelled 30 military export permits to the State of Israel, including the direct transfer of F-35 fighter jet parts because this equipment could be used to commit serious violations of international humanitarian law. UN experts back in February specifically urged Australia to immediately halt arms transfers to Israel, with the UN Human Rights Council making clear that this includes, and I quote, direct and indirect transfer or sale of arms, munitions, parts, components and dual-use items. The Albanese government currently has 66 military exports permits active with the State of Israel and over 70 companies pumping out parts into the F-35 global supply chain. Why hasn't the Albanese government followed suit and cancelled these permits in relation to Israel?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Wong.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Shoebridge for the question because it gives me the opportunity to respond to some of the misinformation he and others in the Greens political party are putting out. And I would start by making this really clear. Senator Shoebridge has spoken with approbation of the UK government's decision. He may have seen I have made comments about the UK government's decision, but I would make the point that we have actually been ahead of where the United Kingdom is, because we have not been exporting weapons to Israel or ammunition for the last 5 years. So perhaps when the Greens come in here and make political statements which are incorrect, they might want to see the facts. They are very happy to be supportive of the decision that the United Kingdom has made, but fail to recognise that, in fact, Australia is not in the same position because we are not exporting weapons as you describe. Now, well, you are continuing to interject, Senator Shoebridge, and what I find interesting is that you continue to run a line in this place and publicly in the face of the sort of frankly, violence and aggression and disharmony we have seen in these last 24 hours, and you know it not to be true. And that is irresponsible.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Shoebridge, first supplementary.
Perhaps we'll get an answer to this question. Last week, the Irish government sought legal advice. Last week, the Irish government sought legal advice on the import of goods from the State of Israel and stopped the importation of defence or military equipment from Israel. The Canadian Foreign Minister has also announced a suspension of some 30 weapons permits, including weapons permits that are going through the US to Israel. Why hasn't your government stopped contracts with Israeli arms manufacturers and weapons being sent to Israel via third countries?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator. And I again would invite you to look at where we are compared to the two jurisdictions that you have outlined. I mean, this is just again a proposition
Minister
which
Wong,
is.
please resume your seat. Senator Shoebridge, you've asked your question. I had to call you to order during the last response from Senator Shoebridge. You are not in a debate with me. I've called you to order. That is what I expect. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. I again am very happy for you to refer to those two jurisdictions, Senator Shoebridge, but if you do so, it would be the honourable thing to do, the decent thing to do, to recognise where Australia is in comparison to those jurisdictions, which is we have not exported weapons or ammunition to Israel for the last 5 years. That is in a different position to those other countries. But but the reality is, Senator Shoebridge, you don't acknowledge that because it doesn't suit your narrative. It doesn't suit your political purposes. It doesn't suit your political campaign. And so you are happy to foment social disharmony in this country.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Shoebridge, just a few seconds ago, I called you to order. You are not in a running commentary with the minister. I've asked you to listen in silence. That is what I expect. Minister, please continue.
What I again would say is that Senator Shoebridge and others in the Greens continue to peddle things, facts, stories which are not true on this.
Senator Shoebridge, second supplementary.
Voted yet, huh? The ICJ, the highest legal authority, said very clearly in July, all countries must abstain from entering into economic or trade dealings with Israel concerning the occupied Palestinian territory or parts thereof which may entrench its unlawful presence in the territory. Why has your government done nothing at all to follow that direction?
Thank you. Senator Polley, it applies equally to you. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. What I would say to Senator Shoebridge is I have made very clear on behalf of this country our view about the importance of the observance of international law. We have been clear and consistent that Israel must protect civilians. We have been clear and consistent that Australia's view is Israel must act in accordance with the orders of the International Court of Justice, including in the provision of basic services and humanitarian assistance. I have said repeatedly that Palestinian civilians cannot be made to pay the price of defeating Hamas. We have worked with partners. Well, you know, this is called diplomacy. This is called, this is working with other countries like Canada, like the United Kingdom, like Jordan, like the United Arab Emirates towards a common solution. It's about bringing people together, actually, and I know what you are about is division.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is...
Shoebridge, we have moved on. I expect you to acknowledge that. Senator Grogan, please start your question again and restart the clock.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator McAllister. I know that all Australians want to ensure that the energy system is reliable and affordable, and I would also draw people's attention to the recent evidence from the CSIRO that firmed renewables are the cheapest form of energy. And can the Minister please update the chamber on how the government's renewables plan is delivering reliable and affordable energy to Australians?
Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Grogan, for your question. Well, I can update the chamber that last week the government was able to announce backing for 6 large-scale batteries for Victoria and South Australia. And having gone out to tender for 600 megawatts, these projects will deliver nearly 1,000 megawatts of storage. And the projects are being underwritten by the Capacity Investment Scheme as part of the Albanese Government's Reliable Renewables Plan. Now, this scheme will deliver for our future generation needs by underwriting 32 gigawatts of capacity. We are investing in the cheapest form of energy. And as the Australian Energy Market Operator said back in April, we are seeing increasing renewable energy records being set, which is a good thing for Australian consumers, as it is key to driving prices down. Our plan overall is working. We've seen a 25% increase in renewables in the national grid. We have seen record investment in batteries and storage. We have greenlit 60 renewable projects. But on top of that investment, we are providing direct relief. We're delivering $300 in energy price relief to every household, and that comes on top of $3 billion in energy relief for millions, including pensioners, veterans, low-income families. Relief, of course, that those opposite voted against. And in their relentless negativity, they have been completely unable to vote for this or any other number of measures that are designed to support people with cost of living. When it comes to energy, Senator Grogan, we are seeing encouraging signs, because the impact of the recent DMO and our rebates mean that this year all DMO states are at least 10% and up to 22.8% cheaper than they would have been.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. I know previous attempts to underwrite new energy generation have not been as successful as the government's Capacity Investment Scheme. Can the Minister update the chamber on further progress on how the government's Reliable Renewables Plan is attracting investment in renewable energy?
Minister McAllister.
Well, thank you, President. Well, I can inform the chamber that the government's Capacity Investment Scheme is working. And as I indicated in my answer to your primary question, Senator Grogan, there has been enormous interest from the private sector. And it does stand in contrast to the 22 failed energy policies from those opposite. Mr Taylor's underwriting new generation investments program, the UNGI program, remember that, which could perhaps have been titled the Underwriting No Generation Investment Program, because it failed to underwrite any new generation whatsoever, any at all. And in contrast, we were able to support 6 projects in Victoria and in your home state of South Australia, and more than 100 bids were made, a pipeline of viable projects. I can also update the chamber that the first capacity investment scheme tender for Western Australia has been massively oversubscribed, over 6 times what was tendered.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And thank you for that information. I would also note the government has not taken the path of supporting nuclear energy, which the CSIRO have identified as the most expensive form of energy. Most expensive form of energy. Can the minister explain why the government's approach is the best pathway to Australia's energy system?
Minister McAllister.
Well, thanks, President. And just as we listen to the experts when it comes to climate science, we also listen to the experts on the energy system. And the experts, for example, at the Smart Energy Council say that the Coalition's nuclear plan could cost around $600 billion. Now, the Shadow Treasurer, of course, would need to deal with this, and Mr Taylor knew that nuclear wasn't viable when he was a minister in the last government. He certainly did nothing about this issue as minister. But here is what he said about nuclear in May. He said, well, at the end of the day, all generators, if they're going to be successful in delivering affordable, reliable energy and bring down emissions, have got to deliver a return on capital. Well, what did the Leader of the Opposition actually announce? Not that. Not letting the market decide, not underwriting anything even, but state-owned nuclear plants, paid for by the taxpayer to deliver the most expensive form of energy that there is. Poor Mr Taylor, he doesn't have a lot of luck in shadow cabinet, does he?
Thank you, Minister McAllister. And order. I'd like to order. I'd also like to acknowledge in the public gallery former Senator Sean Edwards. Senator Tyrrell isn't here, so I'm going to Senator Nampijinpa-Price.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Minister McAllister. Minister, a meeting is planned for the 121 New South Wales Aboriginal Land Councils in Orange to discuss the implications of Minister Plibersek's decision to block the Regis gold mine. Minister, do you accept that this decision by Minister Plibersek has caused serious concern among elected New South Wales land councils by undermining 40 years of New South Wales land rights legislation?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinpa-Price. Minister.
Thank you very much, President, and thank you, Senator Nampijinpa-Price, for the question. We've talked about this issue, as you are aware, in this chamber for a number of weeks now in response to questions asked by people over here. And as I've made clear repeatedly, on this side of the chamber we apply the law. And there are a range of reasons why it should be obvious to those opposite that that is an important principle, because in a decent society the law is not an instrument to be weaponised. And we know what happens when governments don't apply the law, when governments take a different approach, because we know what that looks like. We've seen it. It looks like robo-debt. It looks like resources allocated on the basis of colour-coded spreadsheets. It looks like car parks, sports rorts, all over again.
I haven't thought about them.
And working outside the law is a dangerous way to operate.
Order.
It is a recipe for uncertainty, and it's designed—
Minister, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. Minister, please continue.
It's a dangerous way to operate, and it's a recipe for uncertainty that'll scare off investment.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Nampijinpa-Price.
Thank you, President. Just a point of order, direct relevance to the question. The Minister appears to be veering away from answering the question.
I believe the Minister's being relevant to the question, but I will continue to listen closely to her answer. Minister.
Thank you, President. Well, as I was indicating, the approach that we take in this and all other decisions is to apply the law, and the Minister has been very clear about that. Now, doubtless, that will excite strong views. There will always be people in communities who seek to see projects go ahead, and there will always be people in communities who oppose projects for a variety of reasons, and we're always interested in the opinions of all stakeholders. Indeed, it is why, in considering this particular project that your question refers to, Senator, the Minister took advice from a range of organisations, and the advice I have
Thank
is
you,
that—
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Nampijinka-Price, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, aside from within those 121 land councils I refer to, does the government accept that the Barraville Land Council CEO and veteran of the 1965 Freedom Ride, Philip Hall's assessment that this decision causes a lot of confusion and it brings division within the community?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price. Minister.
Thanks very much, President. And Senator, I did see those remarks reported in the media this morning, and as I was indicating in my answer to your primary question, of course decisions like this draw attention from a range of people in the community. It was certainly the case when a similar decision was made by Ms Lee in the previous government under the same Act, under the same section. There were a range of opinions in the local community. There were a range of opinions in the local community, some supportive, some very disappointed. But the fact remains that the Act requires the Minister to consider, to consult on the application before her, and in this case she did so, and she took advice from 3 different Indigenous organisations in the local area, as I understand it, and the advice I have is that 2 of them were opposed and 1 of them was neutral. And that was amongst the evidence considered by Ms Plibersek in making the decision that she made under the law.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinka-Price, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Will the Minister seek out a meeting with these groups to hear their concerns?
Good question.
Thank you, Senator. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Again, and I refer to the answers I've already provided, the government is aware that the protection of cultural heritage and the way that we approach that inevitably is of interest for all Australians. And we are, of course, interested in the views, most particularly of First Nations groups in New South Wales and across the country. I think most people in this chamber will recall that after the destruction of Juukan Gorge, all major parties, yours, ours, agreed that that couldn't happen again, and undertook, and both parties agreed at that time that there were opportunities.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you, President. Once again, point of order. Relevance. The question was, would the Minister seek out these bodies and hear their concerns? Simple,
I will draw
yes or
the
no.
Minister to your question. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. And as I indicated, this chamber has had the opportunity previously to consider the need for reform to cultural heritage arrangements. And as I understand it, there is a bipartisan understanding that such reform should take place and consultation will be core to that.
The time for answering has expired. I understand it suits the Senate if we go back to Senator Tyrrell's question.
Goes to the Senate. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Private hospitals, especially not-for-profit services, are losing money and fast becoming unsustainable. If private hospitals in Tasmania and other regional areas close down, it will become even harder for us to access healthcare in an overstretched system. At the same time, private health services have told me they have empty elective surgery and psychology beds. What is the government doing to address underutilised and under-sustainable not-for-profit private health services and ballooning elective surgery and psychology waiting lists in our public system?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Tyrrell for the question and for the ongoing advocacy and interest she provides on healthcare in Tasmania. The question Senator Tyrrell asks really goes to a state government responsibility here, because whilst the Commonwealth funds and makes a contribution to hospitals, they are owned and operated by state governments and state health services. And whilst there have been in past public-private partnerships with private hospitals to ensure that if there is excess capacity in those hospitals, that public lists can be delivered through private arrangements. They have been. Sorry, Senator Ruston keeps interjecting. I can't hear her. I can't hear what you're saying, Order. Senator Ruston, but you are interrupting.
Order.
Well. It's not so much if it's a one-off, it's just when it's persistent it does distract you from your answer. But the point you raise is one where I think most state governments that I know have entered into arrangements with private hospitals for exactly those sorts of things, including in mental health services, definitely elective surgery. So there is nothing stopping that. I know the Department of Health under Minister Butler's leadership is looking at the issues that private hospital providers, particularly those not-for-profit providers, have raised about viability and pressures in the system, and I think it's in everyone's interest to make sure that the private and public hospital system continues to operate. Obviously, they do rely on each other. The private system often does the high-volume, low-acuity work, and then the public sector does all the other areas. But it's absolutely important that they work together, and I know the Department of Health is looking into some of those viability
time for
issues.
Answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
President, during the COVID-19 pandemic, as you mentioned, Tasmanian private hospital services were used to reduce the elective surgery waiting lists, so we know that it can be done. Would the government consider a shared care model where elective surgery and psychology services are provided in private hospitals that are operating under capacity, so private health services can become more sustainable and elective surgery waiting lists are reduced?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
I mean, we're really keen to work with the state governments and anyone else who's interested to ensure that demand for health services more generally is being met. That's why we've had a lot of focus on urgent care clinics and ensuring that Medicare is able to, that people are able to afford basically to go and see a GP, because that helps public hospitals by keeping people out of hospital. But the point you raise is about when you are needing hospital care, how do you make sure that you optimise the arrangements there? And I think, certainly from our point of view, we have no issue with public health systems engaging with private health systems to deliver the program and operations that are needed. It really is a matter for those state hospitals, though. We work very closely with the Tasmanian government in these areas and are very open to suggestions from the Tasmanian government. I acknowledge you've got a small health system in Tasmania and it needs to work together, the public and private system.
Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Department of Veteran Affairs cost model provides a minimum fee to private hospitals to provide care to eligible patients receiving care in private health settings. Would the government consider this already proven model as a way to support both private hospitals providing care and to ease elective surgery waiting lists?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, in a sense, when public hospitals do engage the private hospitals, it's usually done on a model like Veterans Affairs. So it's usually for, the national efficient price of that particular procedure is then that underpins the arrangement. So I think that it largely exists now. I think it really is a matter of what the public hospital system can afford. Obviously, they're paying for all their operating theatres, their staff. They're dealing with all the emergency work that comes in as well as the elective work, and that's something the private system can offer, is that they're not constrained by emergency work. But it really comes down to, I think, what's affordable and how do you manage all the work that's being required. But definitely utilising the private system to help is part of the solution in the longer term, as is keeping people out of hospital and using new technology to make sure people don't have to undergo operations as well.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Wong. Minister, on the recommendation of the then Chief of the Defence Force, General Angus Campbell, the government will strip Distinguished Service Medals from soldiers for allegations of war crimes that have not been proven in a criminal court. Yet the government will not strip the Distinguished Service Cross Medal off General Campbell. Minister, why do soldiers under General Campbell's command lose medals, while he keeps his medal for commanding them?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Can I thank the senator for his question, and Senator Roberts, as the Deputy Prime Minister has stated to the House of Representatives today, we finalised our commitment to close out the recommendations of the Inspector General of the ADF Afghanistan Inquiry Report, known as the Brereton Report, which was commissioned in 2016. A report which found credible information of alleged unlawful killings of 39 individuals in 23 separate incidents. Concluded there was credible information of subculture of elitism and deviation from acceptable standards, and made a broad range of findings in 143 recommendations. As the Deputy Prime Minister has outlined, we have taken final action as a consequence from that report, resulting in the closure of 139 of these recommendations. Two recommendations of the report related to command accountability and the treatment of honours and awards given to commanders during the relevant period. These recommendations relate to a small number of individuals who held command positions during the period in which the inquiry found evidence of unlawful conduct. The Deputy Prime Minister has written to...
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. A point of order. The question was very specific about Angus Campbell's Distinguished Service Cross. Why won't it be stripped?
The Minister is being relevant to your question, Senator Roberts. Minister, please continue.
Sorry, Senator Roberts, I was seeking to respond by way of explaining how we were dealing with the recommendations in the report which relate to command accountability. I understand that the Minister for Defence, the DPM, has written to those whose awards were referred for consideration to advise that there has been a conclusion to that consideration of those awards. Decisions that have been made in relation to those awards are consistent with the findings and recommendations of the Brereton Report. Decisions around a command accountability are consistent with those same findings, and obviously we're not in a position, given the Privacy Act, to disclose the details and outcomes.
Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. The Brereton Report specifically excluded any findings on command accountability. The Implementation Oversight Panel, though, provided independent advice to government that the Brereton Report, in doing this, was inappropriate and senior command accountability must be examined. Minister, why are Defence's most senior leaders being let off scot-free for allegations in the Brereton Report, and why is your government ignoring the Oversight Panel's advice?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Wong.
President, I will see if I can get any further information to respond to the assertion in relation to the panel, because I don't recall that the facts being quite as you assert them, Senator Robert, but it isn't my portfolio, so I'll certainly have a look at that. But as I read out in my primary response, the recommendations, or two of the recommendations of the Brereton Report, did relate to command accountability and the treatment of honours and awards given to commanders during the relevant period. So I think that was an alternative assertion was in your question. That's not the advice to me, and we have acted on the basis of and in a manner consistent with those recommendations.
Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, the criteria for the Distinguished Service Cross at the time General Campbell was nominated required him to be in action, meaning direct contact with an enemy. Yet there are no records of General Campbell being in action. Why does your government refuse to have the Honours Awards and Appeals Tribunal examine his award?
Minister Wong.
President, through you, Senator Roberts, I think that is a slightly different question to the one you asked me, which related to the Brereton Report. In relation to the actual awarding of those honours, that's obviously not a political decision, but a decision that is governed within that honours and award systems. I would make the point these matters have been canvassed at length by, I think, Senator Lambie in a number of estimates, and I'd refer you to those answers, which including direct answers, to my recollection, including before the change of government, from General Campbell himself.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Gallagher. The regrettable outcome of the Voice referendum has deepened the divide and left a profound sense of betrayal among many First Nations people. As we confront the worsening conditions in Indigenous communities, it is crucial to reflect on how we arrived at this juncture. According to New Horizons report in 2014, as little as just 26% of demand for alcohol and other drug services were being met, and since then the funding for AOD treatment services has not increased. I travelled around WA listening to many Indigenous communities who raised with me many local issues and feel they don't have a voice. Will the Minister develop an Indigenous-specific alcohol and other drug strategy informed by the needs of First Nations people, as recommended by the WA Network of Alcohol and Other Drug Agencies report?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Payman for the question. This government has a proud record in this last 2 years on focusing on delivering practical progress in Indigenous health. Since coming to government, we've been taking a lot of different steps to tackle the critical gaps in health outcomes for Indigenous Australians under Minister Burney's leadership, under Minister Carney's leadership, under Minister McCarthy's leadership. There's a range of different programs, Senator Payman, that are going into either training First Nations health workers across the country, where we already have 180 students being enrolled, because that is key to providing services to remote parts of Australia. Also around cancer care, also around renal care. The issue you raise around alcohol and other drugs, I will take further advice on. I'm not aware of. I'm sure that there is work going on in that area. I don't have it in front of me, but I know we are taking a very broad approach to supporting First Nations communities. I also agree with Senator Payman that it was a regrettable outcome from the referendum, and I think certainly from our government's point of view, right throughout that time and that debate and subsequently to the vote, we haven't changed the amount of effort that's going into the practical delivery of services and supports to First Nations communities right around the country, whether it be in metropolitan areas or more remote areas, as you outlined in your question, in WA or in the Northern Territory or anywhere else. We are 100% committed to making a difference and improving the health outcomes of First Nations Australians in this country.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister, for the answer, and I look forward to getting more information on that strategy. How does the government plan to address the alarming overrepresentation of Indigenous Australians in the criminal justice system, where there are 13 times more likely to be imprisoned than non-Indigenous Australians?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, as Senator Payman may remember, we took some commitments to the last election about justice reinvestment. That was led by Senator Pat Dodson, also a Labor senator from WA, and Minister Burney. And those programs are being rolled out because we recognised in opposition and argued for many years from opposition about the need to tackle the high imprisonment rate of First Nations adults and young people in this country, and committed to reducing imprisonment rates. And there are 30 community-led justice reinvestment initiatives across Australia, with 20 of them funding or being funded already. And these are based on successful programs which seek to provide support to reduce the amount of recidivism going on and to make sure we are providing culturally responsive justice reinvestment programs in those local communities. There's plenty of evidence.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has now expired. Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Considering the significant gaps in Year 12 completion rates and life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, what specific measures will the government implement to give Indigenous Australians a voice to improve educational outcomes and life expectancy?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, all of those are areas covered by Closing the Gap, where there are programs, and these are an important report that's provided annually to the Parliament on improving the educational outcomes of First Nations Australians, ensuring that we're dealing with some of those health issues that we've outlined, looking at issues around justice and offending, a whole range of areas that we have to continue to work on. And, you know, we are making progress in some areas, but we need to do more. But I can tell you the amount of effort and investment going into this area is unprecedented, because we are, and housing, which is also a critical issue. We have a record housing investment that Minister Burney led when she was in that position, which will actually make a difference. If you have a house and you have stable living arrangements, you're more likely to finish school. And so all of this is interconnected, and we're all focused on improving the lives of First Nations Australians.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. It follows the Environment Minister's Cultural Heritage Declaration on the McPhillamys Gold Mine project. On the 29th of August, New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council Chair and local Wiradjuri man, Roy R.C., said, "We've got an Aboriginal elder. He's a man who speaks with authority, and he believes the Section 10 application on the McPhillamys gold mine near Blaney was fabricated." Will the government now review Ms Plibersek's declaration, including to investigate whether the claims she upheld were falsified?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to thank you, President. Thank you to Senator McDonald for the question. And I think that really goes to the same issue that Senator McAllister has responded to on numerous occasions in relation to questions on that side, and that is that the Environment Minister has a statutory role under the legislation, which from recollection was actually passed by whilst the Liberal Party was in government, from memory, but I may be wrong on that. But certainly the original federal legislation, sure, fair enough, as she has a responsibility under the law, and the Minister has sought to apply the law.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
Why did the government oppose the position of the Aboriginal Land Council Chair, who are the cultural authority in the area under New South Wales government laws?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Wong.
Well, President, through you, Senator McDonald, that is an assertion of law. I'm not in a position to respond to your primary assertion in that question, but I'd again revert to what I've said earlier, which is Minister Plibersek, as the relevant Environment Minister, has a role under the legislation, and she has applied that in accordance with the law.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
The Minister has repeatedly said that First Nations Australians have been asking for and offering for decades to be listened to on matters that impact on their lives. So why, in the case of her rejection of the construction of the McPhillamys gold mine tailings dam, is the government not listening to the legally recognised local elders and members of the Orange Local Aboriginal Land Council?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. And Minister Wong.
Again, you make an assertion in that about Indigenous representation. I'm not in a position to respond to whether or not that assertion is accurate, but I would say to you again, Senator, that Minister Plibersek has applied the Act in accordance with the law. That is what a person in her position is expected to do, just as the former Minister, Susan Lee, Ms Lee, also applied the Act in respect of the law.
Senator Darmanin.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, Senator Watt. Cost of living pressures are top of mind for all Australians, particularly in the regions. When I speak with my constituents in regional Victoria, they tell me they're thinking about things like housing affordability, the cost of energy, prices at the checkout and their wages. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering meaningful cost of living relief while creating secure, well-paid jobs in our regions?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Darmanin, who's making an outstanding contribution since she joined us here in the Senate, and I know we all look forward to seeing much more from her in the coming years as well. Well, under the Albanese government, there have been nearly 1 million extra jobs created in the last couple of years, including in many in regional areas. Senator Cash, I didn't think I'd be hearing from you until the second supplementary, so well done. You beat my expectations. In regional New South Wales, there's been more than 128,000 extra jobs created, mostly full-time positions. Yes, I think that is something worth shouting about, so I'm glad that you're shouting with us. Senator Henderson, nearly 68,000 new jobs in regional Victoria. And back to you, Senator Cash, 17,000 in regional Western Australia.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Order on my left, and Senator Watt, may I remind you to address your questions to the chair.
Thank you, President. In my home state of Queensland, there have been 99,600 extra jobs created outside Brisbane, including over 56,000 that are full-time. And that includes an extra 48,000 regional women joining the workforce and almost 40,000 more young people. The measures brought in by the Albanese government, like cheaper childcare, fee-free TAFE, apprenticeship initiatives and other support designed to fill skill shortages, are supporting this growth and delivering more career opportunities in our regions, particularly for women and young people. And this matters because one of the most important things governments can do to assist regional Australians with the cost of living pressures that they're facing is to ensure they have a job. And under those opposite, we had 1 million fewer jobs in Australia, as well as having lower wages and less secure work. And they've said that they want to take Australians back to those dark times if they are returned to office. We've already seen Mr Dutton and the Coalition promise to repeal casual workers' rights, repeal the right to disconnect, repeal as yet undisclosed other workplace laws. They've said no to energy bill relief, no to housing, no to tax cuts, no to universal superannuation on paid parental leave. They just say
Minister.
no.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Darmanin, first supplementary.
Since coming to government, the Albanese Labor government has announced a raft of measures designed to help all Australians respond to the cost of living pressures. These measures have included things like a tax cut to every taxpayer, $300 energy bill relief and record investment in social and affordable housing. Why is the Albanese Labor government's plan the best way to deliver cost of living support to regional Australia? And what would be the impact on the regions of an alternative plan?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister, beg your pardon.
Please, President, goes to the relevance of the question to the minister's portfolio responsibilities, an issue raised earlier this week. Senator Darmanin named 3 specific policy areas: tax changes. She asked about social housing, and she asked about energy bills. To my knowledge, none of those specific policy areas cited are responsibilities of the portfolio minister or the minister that he is representing.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I will check with the clerk because I understand at the beginning of question time Senator Wong did reassign some responsibilities, and I will double-check that. Senator Birmingham, we're not in a debate. I said I would check, and that's what I'm doing. I advise the chamber that I am advised that Minister Watt is also repping regional development, and he can answer those questions that you identified, Senator Birmingham, and which were asked in that capacity. Please continue, Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Why don't they like the regions? Why don't they want to hear about the regions over there? Why don't they want to hear about tax cuts for the regions? Why don't they want to hear about jobs for the regions? Why do they want to hear about wage rises for the regions? Why don't they want to hear about housing for the regions? You know why they don't want to hear about that? Because they say no to all of it. They say no to all of it. They say no to the regional Australians. They say no to urban Australians. They say no to men. They say no to women. It doesn't really matter what we talk about. They always say no. They even say no to a supplementary question. That's how negative you are. And you're absolutely right, Senator Darmanin. Our government is focused on delivering cost-of-living relief for regional Australians. We're doing that by backing multiple wage rises that have put an extra $143 per week in the pockets of 2.6 million low-paid Australians, delivering tax cuts for every regional Australian worker and delivering $300 in energy bill relief for every regional Australian home and businesses. We say yes, you say no.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Darmanin, second supplementary.
After a decade of failed energy policies, deliberate wage stagnation and telling hard-working Australians the only way to own a home is by rating their superannuation, what are the key barriers to delivering the Albanese Labor government's cost-of-living relief to all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Darmanin, you asked what are the key barriers to delivering the Albanese Labor government's cost-of-living relief to all Australians. There they are. I can see Simon. I can see Michaelia. I can see James.
Senator
I can
Watt.
see all of you.
Minister Watt, I remind you, order, to refer to senators by their correct titles.
We all know that those opposite treat superannuation like the boogeyman, like it's something to be feared. They opposed it when it was created and they've opposed it ever since. This week they're at it again, trying to strip back superannuation rights, this time for Australian women through paid parental leave. And it's not right that regional women be denied a decent retirement because of the ideological obsessions of the coalition. And when it comes to housing, the Albanese government would already be rolling out housing across regional Australia if it weren't for the coalition of the Libs, the Nats and the Greens teaming up yet again to block our investments, delay funding and even try and block legislation about helping people to buy. You say no all the time.
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.